the silent killer hidden in your healthy kitchen. If you've been waking up more tired than when you went to bed, if your blood pressure numbers keep creeping up no matter what you do, or if you've been eating what you think is a healthy diet and nothing seems to be changing for the better, then what I'm about to share with you today might be the most important thing you hear all year. I'm Dr. Michael Kent, and I've spent over 2 decades working with patients who are doing everything they think is right, reading labels, buying organic, choosing the light version, and yet their cardiovascular health keeps declining. And here's what I've come to believe after all those years. The problem isn't laziness. It's not even bad intentions. The problem is misinformation baked right into the products sitting in your kitchen. Look, by the end of this video, and we're talking about the next 15 minutes or so, you'll understand exactly what ingredient is quietly attacking your arteries every single day, where it hides in foods most people consider safe and even beneficial, and a clear, manageable plan to start turning things around starting this week. Now let me ask you something, and I genuinely want you to drop your answer in the comments below. How many times in the last week did you eat something labeled natural or heart healthy? Because here's what I see happening. Those labels are doing more harm than good. They're creating a false sense of security that keeps people from asking the right questions. Let me start by telling you about one of my patients. I had a patient, let's call him Raymond. Raymond was 58 years old, a retired school teacher, the kind of guy who coached Little League on weekends and took his wife line dancing on Friday nights. He wasn't overweight, he exercised. He genuinely believed he was eating well. But Raymond kept coming into my office with the same complaints: persistent fatigue, elevated triglycerides that wouldn't budge, blood pressure hovering just above where it should be. And get this, his cholesterol numbers actually looked decent. That was throwing everyone off. Raymond had tried everything. He'd cut out red meat, switched to whole grain everything, started eating yogurt parfaits for breakfast, drank juice instead of soda. And you know what? Everyone around him, including a previous doctor, told him he was doing great. Keep it up, Raymond. When we finally sat down and went through his actual daily food log, and this is where it gets interesting, we discovered that Raymond was consuming somewhere between 45 and 60 grams of added sugar every single day. And he had no idea, because every single item he'd chosen was marketed as healthy. But here's what nobody was telling Raymond about what that sugar was doing to his arteries. And I'll get to that in just a moment. Section 3, Understanding the Real Problem. All right, so to understand why this happens, you need to know something fundamental about how your cardiovascular system responds to the modern diet. Now, most people think of their arteries like simple pipes. Either they're clear or they're clogged. But here's the thing, it's actually much more like a living communication network. Your blood vessels are constantly receiving chemical signals, responding, adjusting, inflaming, and repairing. And when you flood that network with the wrong signals repeatedly over months and years, the system starts to break down in ways that don't show up until there's a crisis. Let me break this down for you. Here's what actually happens in your body. First, processed sugar enters your bloodstream rapidly, especially when there's little or no fiber to slow it down. Then, your pancreas fires off a large insulin response to manage that spike. Over time, and we're talking about a pattern that unfolds across months and years, that repeated insulin demand leads to something called insulin resistance, where your cells stop responding properly. And eventually, your liver gets overwhelmed processing the excess fructose and starts converting it directly into fat particles, triglycerides, which get dumped into your bloodstream. Now, most doctors will tell you to watch your LDL cholesterol. And look, that's not wrong, but it's incomplete. What they're often missing is the role that added sugar plays in the entire chain. Not just cholesterol, but triglycerides, blood pressure, arterial inflammation, and the stability of existing plaque. You know what the real problem is? It's not one big dietary villain that you can spot a mile away. The real problem is a quiet, pervasive ingredient that has been engineered into the food supply in ways that make it nearly invisible until the damage is already done. Section 4, The Villain Revealed. So what's really driving this damage to your cardiovascular system? It's not saturated fat, it's not sodium, and honestly, this genuinely surprises most of the patients I see for the first time. The real culprit is added sugar, specifically the concentrated, highly processed forms of fructose-based sweeteners that have been quietly engineered into thousands of packaged foods. Not the natural sugar in a banana or a handful of blueberries. I'm talking about the sugar that's been deliberately inserted into foods that often don't even taste sweet. And here's what shocks people when I tell them this. You don't need to be eating candy bars or drinking sodas for this damage to occur. You only need to be following the modern healthy eating script, the one written by the food industry, to be getting dangerous amounts of added sugar every single day without realizing it. Let me show you exactly what happens. Added sugar doesn't attack your heart from one direction. It comes at your cardiovascular system from multiple angles simultaneously. It drives triglycerides into dangerous territory. It suppresses your protective HDL cholesterol. It interferes with the mechanisms that regulate blood pressure. And perhaps most dangerously, it creates chronic low-grade inflammation that can destabilize arterial plaque. When plaque ruptures, your body forms a clot. That clot blocks blood flow. That is a heart attack or a stroke. What makes this especially dangerous, and this is something I wish far more doctors talked about publicly, is that the process is completely silent. You don't feel inflammation happening inside your arteries. You don't feel plaque building. You feel fine right up until the moment you don't. I see this pattern in my practice constantly, and I am convinced that added sugar, hidden inside foods marketed as healthy, is one of the most underappreciated cardiovascular threats of our time. Now, where is this added sugar hiding in your daily life? Let me show you the places most people never suspect. Number 1, low-fat flavored yogurt. This is a big one. When manufacturers remove fat from yogurt to make it light or heart-healthy, the product becomes flavorless. So what do? They load it with added sugar. A single small container can contain 20 to 26 grams of added sugar. That is nearly the entire daily limit recommended by health organizations. Here's what happens. You start your morning thinking you've made a virtuous choice, and you've already loaded your cardiovascular system with a sugar hit before you've left the house. Most people have no idea. Number 2, whole grain breakfast cereals. Look, I know they say whole grain right on the box, but here's the problem. Many of these cereals contain 12 to 18 grams of sugar per serving, and the typical person pours about twice a serving. Check the ingredients. If sugar or any sugar synonym appears in the first 3 items on that list, your heart is starting the day under metabolic stress. Number 3, 100% fruit juice. Now this one surprises people more than almost any other. When fruit is juiced, the fiber is removed, and fiber is exactly what slows sugar absorption. What remains is a concentrated fructose solution that hits your liver fast. What actually happens is your liver gets overwhelmed, triglycerides go up, and you get essentially the same metabolic response as drinking soda. Multiple research studies have now drawn a direct line between regular juice consumption and elevated cardiovascular risk. Number 4, granola bars and protein snack bars. These are desserts in disguise. I'll give you an example. Pick up any popular fitness bar at the grocery store and flip it over. Syrups, honey, fruit concentrates, dextrose, maltodextrin. You might see 4 to 6 different sugar names stacked together. Your body doesn't distinguish between organic and processed when it comes to metabolic signaling. Your arteries get the same message regardless. Number 5, reduced fat sauces, dressings, and condiments. Barbecue sauce, teriyaki glaze, light salad dressings, low-fat ketchup. When fat is stripped out, sugar steps in to carry the flavor. And this is why people who meticulously avoid fried foods and fatty meats can still be consuming extraordinary amounts of added sugar without knowing it. The condiments they're drizzling over their healthy grilled chicken are quietly undermining the whole effort. Number 6, sweetened plant-based milks. Vanilla oat milk, chocolate almond milk, flavored coconut milk. Many of these contain 10 to 16 grams of added sugar per glass. The unsweetened versions are dramatically better choices, but the sweetened ones are often the default on grocery shelves. Number 7, sports drinks and flavored waters. Unless you're running a marathon or doing intense athletic training, you don't need electrolyte drinks. They exist to fuel performance athletes. For the rest of us going about daily life, they're essentially sugar water with a sporty logo on the bottle. And here's something I bet you've never heard before. The danger isn't just any one of these foods, it's the cumulative daily total. A yogurt for breakfast, juice with lunch, a granola bar as a snack, teriyaki sauce at dinner. You could easily hit 80 grams of added sugar in a day while believing you've eaten well. That's the trap. This reminds me of another patient. Let's call her Gloria. Gloria was 63, a retired office manager who had been following what she described as a clean diet for over a decade. She was proud of it, honestly. No fast food, no candy, no soda. Her pantry was full of things labeled organic, natural, and plant-based. Now, when we tested her fasting triglycerides, we found something surprising. They were significantly elevated, 230 milligrams per deciliter. That's a number associated with increased cardiovascular risk, and it had crept up steadily over the past 4 years. And you know what the crazy part was? The cause wasn't hidden junk food. It was the oat milk smoothies she made every morning, the natural granola she ate as an afternoon snack, the low-fat raspberry vinaigrette she used on her salads daily. Each individually seemed reasonable. Together, they were loading her liver with concentrated fructose day after day. Once we identified the sources and made targeted swaps, not a complete diet overhaul, just specific changes to the biggest offenders, within about 6 weeks, Gloria's triglycerides had dropped by nearly 60 points. Gloria told me, "I honestly felt like I'd been lied to for years. I was doing everything right by the labels, and the labels were wrong." That's the difference between eating by marketing and eating by physiology. Your body doesn't read packaging. It only responds to what you actually put in it. Now look, I need to be honest with you about something. Cardiovascular damage that has been building for years doesn't reverse in a week. Your arteries didn't get into their current state overnight, and expecting an instant fix sets you up for frustration and failure. But, and this is really important, the human body has a remarkable capacity to begin recovering when you remove the chronic insult. Research consistently shows that reducing added sugar intake can produce measurable improvements in triglycerides, blood pressure, and inflammatory markers within weeks, not years. Weeks. So what actually works? What can you realistically control, and what specific steps will give your cardiovascular system the best chance starting right now? Let me give you my exact framework, the same one I walk through with my patients when we're building a plan together. All right, here's the most important principle I teach my patients, and this is something most people have genuinely never framed this way. Your goal is not to eat less sugar. Your goal is to eat real food in forms your metabolism was actually designed to process. Not low sugar by label, not organic sugar instead of regular sugar, but real, whole, minimally processed food where the sugar, if it exists at all, comes packaged with fiber, protein, and the micronutrients that change how your body responds to it. Now, why does this matter so much? Because the problem was never sugar in isolation. It was isolated sugar. Sugar stripped of its natural context and concentrated into a form your metabolism has no evolutionary experience handling at modern quantities. Let me make this really concrete for you. If you eat an apple, you're getting roughly 19 grams of sugar, but it comes with fiber, water, polyphenols, and vitamins that slow absorption and blunt the insulin response. If you drink apple juice, you get roughly the same sugar with none of those moderating factors. Same raw ingredient, completely different metabolic impact. This principle alone explains why some people develop significant cardiovascular risk while eating what appears to be a reasonable diet. It's not just what you eat, it's the form in which you eat it. And I'm going to show you exactly what this looks like in a practical plan. Let me tell you about Leonard. Leonard was 54, came to see me because he was having increasingly frequent palpitations and felt like his energy had completely deserted him. He worked in construction management, stayed active on job sites, wasn't someone you'd look at and say, "That man has a dietary problem." Now, his daily routine looked like this, and I want you to see if this sounds familiar. Every morning, Leonard had a glass of orange juice, a bowl of heart-healthy multigrain cereal with vanilla almond milk, and a flavored yogurt on the side. Mid-morning, he'd grab a granola bar from the snack station at work. Lunch was usually a chicken salad with store-bought dressing. Afternoon was a sports drink to stay hydrated. His day was basically a continuous stream of hidden sugar, from the first thing he consumed to the last. Here's what the problem was. Leonard's cardiovascular system was handling a sugar load equivalent to drinking somewhere between 8 and 10 teaspoons of pure sugar before noon, from sources he had never once suspected. So we made 4 changes. Focused, targeted, and honestly, not that dramatic. First, we replaced the juice with half a grapefruit. Same vitamin C, real fiber, completely different metabolic signal. Second, we switched to plain oats with a handful of walnuts and some fresh berries. No sweetened milk, no added syrup. Third, we replaced the store-bought dressing with olive oil, lemon, and a bit of vinegar. Fourth, the sports drink became plain sparkling water with a slice of citrus. And here's what happened. Within 3 weeks, Leonard's energy returned noticeably. At his 6-week follow-up, his fasting triglycerides had dropped 44 points. His blood pressure, which had been hovering in the borderline range, came down meaningfully without any medication change. Leonard told me, "I genuinely didn't think 4 swaps could do that. I kept waiting for the hard part and it never came." See, that's the difference between fighting your diet and working with your biology. It's not about willpower, it's about information. One mistake I see all the time. People will read only the nutrition facts panel and check the total sugars number. Don't do that alone. Always check the ingredient list. The ingredient list tells you where the sugar came from and how many separate sugar sources are stacked on top of each other. Step number 2, start with drinks. Look, I know this might sound like the obvious first step, but trust me on this. It produces the fastest and most measurable cardiovascular benefit. Removing sugary beverages, including juice, sports drinks, sweetened plant milks, and flavored waters, eliminates concentrated fructose from your diet with a single category decision. What takes its place? Water. Plain sparkling water, unsweetened herbal tea, black coffee if you drink it. Your kidneys love it, your arteries love it, and within a few weeks you often find your taste buds recalibrate. Things that used to taste fine start tasting sickeningly sweet. Step number 3, rebuild your breakfast around protein and fiber. Now, this is where nutrients really come in. Your metabolism needs a stable foundation in the morning, not a sugar spike. The big anchors are protein, fiber, and healthy fats. Think eggs in any form, plain Greek yogurt, the unsweetened kind, with fresh berries and walnuts, steel-cut oats with no added sugar dressed with nut butter and seeds, avocado on whole grain toast, not the sugary packaged variety. But here's a warning, and this is important. Don't try to make every change at once. Overhauling your entire diet in 1 week creates fatigue and backlash. Just start with breakfast. A stable morning blood sugar sets the hormonal tone for the entire day. Step number 4. Move your body daily, but strategically. You don't need to train like an athlete. Honestly, extreme high-intensity exercise without dietary change can actually create its own forms of metabolic stress. What your cardiovascular system really needs is consistent, moderate movement. I tell my patients 20 to 30 minutes of walking after a meal is one of the most powerful tools we have for blunting post-meal blood sugar spikes. It uses the glucose your muscles need and reduces the insulin demand on your pancreas. Even a 15-minute walk makes a measurable difference. Movement is medicine when you apply it thoughtfully. All right, before you start implementing these steps, there are some critical warnings you need to hear. First, do not attempt to dramatically cut sugar intake cold turkey if you are currently on medications for diabetes or blood sugar management. I've had patients come to me who made aggressive dietary changes without coordinating with their prescribing physician, and their glucose levels dropped too quickly. Don't make that mistake. Work with your doctor on this. Second, expect some physical discomfort in the first 1 to 2 weeks. Headaches, irritability, stronger than usual cravings. This is normal. Sugar activates reward pathways in the brain similarly to other addictive substances. The discomfort is temporary and it passes. This is especially important to know in advance so you don't interpret the discomfort as a sign that something is wrong. Look, the key is gradual, sustained reduction, not perfection. Never aim for absolute zero and fail by day 3. Instead, aim for consistent progress week over week. And honestly, this is exactly why I recommend working with a healthcare provider who understands metabolic health rather than trying to navigate this entirely alone. Don't guess with this stuff. Your cardiovascular health is not the place for trial and error without professional guidance. Let me share one more story with you because this really shows you what's possible. I had a patient, we'll call her Dorothy. Dorothy was 67 when she came to see me. She had been living with chronic fatigue and what she described as brain fog that never fully lifted for almost 4 years. Her cardiologist had told her that her heart was structurally fine, nothing obviously wrong, but her quality of life was genuinely suffering. Her life had basically become a series of managed limitations. She couldn't make it through a family gathering without needing to sit down and rest. She was afraid to commit to social plans because she never knew how she'd feel. Every morning started with a sense of dread about whether she'd have enough energy to get through the day. Every doctor she'd seen had attributed it to normal aging. But when we looked at her full metabolic picture and spent real time on her dietary patterns, a very clear story emerged. When we identified the hidden sugar burden in her daily routine and systematically replaced those sources with whole food alternatives, something shifted. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It took about 10 weeks before she noticed a real turning point. But gradually, her energy levels began stabilizing. Then her afternoon crashes disappeared. And eventually, she told me she felt more consistently like herself than she had in years. Dorothy told me recently, "I stopped blaming my age when I realized it wasn't my age at all. It was what I'd been eating for breakfast every morning for 6 years." And that is what this is really about. Not just cardiovascular numbers on a lab report, but the life you're actually able to live, the energy you bring to your family, the mornings you wake up and feel ready rather than depleted. That's why I do what I do. All right, here's what I want you to do, and I'm being specific here. Over the next 21 days, 1. Do the pantry audit I describe. D. Read every label. Create your personal list of surprising hidden sugar sources. 2. Eliminate all sweetened beverages from your daily routine. Replace them with water, unsweetened tea, or sparkling water. This single step alone begins to shift your metabolic baseline. 3. Rebuild your morning meal around protein and fiber. Eggs, plain yogurt, oats with nuts and fresh fruit, no added sugar at breakfast. 4. Add a short walk after your largest meal of the day. 10 to 20 minutes, nothing heroic, just consistent. 5. Schedule a conversation with your doctor about checking your fasting triglycerides and fasting insulin if you haven't done so recently. Know your baseline. Now here's what I want you to track. Not your weight, not calories. Pay attention to your morning energy levels, your afternoon energy consistency, and your craving intensity. These 3 things respond to dietary sugar changes more quickly than almost anything else, and they give you real-time feedback that no scale can provide. Most of my patients notice meaningful improvement in energy stability, reduced afternoon crashes, and better sleep quality within that 3-week window. Look, the goal here isn't perfection. The goal is a consistent direction of travel. Even replacing just 2 hidden sugar sources per week tells your cardiovascular system something important is changing. And listen, if you do this and you start seeing results, leave a comment and let me know. I genuinely love hearing these stories. They're the whole reason I make these videos. All right, let me wrap this up with some straight talk. If someone comes to you promising that one supplement, one superfood, or one simple trick will undo years of cardiovascular damage, treat that with serious skepticism. Your cardiovascular system is complex, and it doesn't respond to shortcuts. But if someone tells you that the damage is already done and it's too late to make a meaningful difference, they're wrong too. The research is clear. Meaningful dietary change at any age produces measurable cardiovascular benefit. Here's the truth. Cardiovascular disease develops through patterns, repeated daily patterns over years. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense that reversing those patterns takes time and consistency. But the direction of change can begin immediately. And that direction is what matters most. What matters most is that you start paying attention. Not obsessively, not with fear, but with the kind of informed awareness that lets you make better choices because you actually understand what you're choosing between. Look, if what I shared today helped you see something differently about the food you've been trusting, do me a favor, drop a comment below. Tell me which hidden sugar source surprised you the most. Tell me what questions you still have. That conversation matters. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You might not know whose life you're protecting by doing that. Remember, the most dangerous threats aren't the ones that look dangerous. They're the ones that wear the packaging of health while quietly doing harm. Now you know what to look for. I'm Dr. Michael Kent. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.